even when you succeed, there is a kind of a lifelessness to that. It doesn't have that feel of like you've got to really think of yourself as super special and shower yourself with compassion and all this stuff. And so people occasionally ask me, like having read the books, are there any productivity techniques you still use? Then you can suddenly kind of taste a little bit of relaxation in the midst of overwhelm, because you can say, well, oh, this thing that I thought was just really hard and I just needed to, buckle down and finally find a way to do.
Gone too far down the time blocking, Pomodoro, control every micro minute. Oliver, one of the core themes in both of your books is around embracing finitude. And there's one particular part that I found fascinating where you said that by embracing our limitations, this actually made it more likely for us to achieve things and even achieve what some people see as impossible. Now, why is that?
I think it's because we exert a lot of effort in life generally, maybe without realizing it, um, into a kind of avoidance, right? We're spending a lot of our days, a lot of our time kind of actively trying not to feel finite. Um, and by that I mean, I'm not really talking specifically about death and mortality, but just the sort of something downstream of that. The fact that kind of in our daily lives we are constrained by reality. There are only so many hours in the day. We can only be in one place at a time. We can't make everyone else do exactly what we want them to do, even if we wish we could. And so there are all these constraints. And I think a lot of what we naturally do is try to sort of not feel constrained in that way. And I think that, digital technology helps us enormously in not feeling constrained. Those of us who are a bit obsessed with productivity techniques and personal development are often looking for ways to do more and not feel like we're at the limits of our capacities. All these different things. I could go on for much, much longer. But I think that something really important happens when we, at least to some degree, allow ourselves to feel those constraints instead, allow ourselves to sort of stop struggling against them, to understand what are the sort of non-negotiable limitations of being a finite human. Because, well, firstly, most obviously, then you can like use your energy on something more useful, right? You can pour it into getting a few things done instead of constantly trying to reach the future point when you can do everything. Um, but in a subtler way that I've still never quite figured out how to describe, it gives you more sort of purchase on the world. It's like you get a bit of traction on reality in a new way. You're no longer skating across the top of it, trying to get to the point where you're super productive or super optimized. You're really here in the muck and you can pick something up and do something with it and take an action and move things forward. And I think the end result of that is that we get to really do more stuff that's meaningful by uh, acknowledging limitation instead of running away from it.
So, on this note of doing things that are meaningful, I know that one of the struggles that a lot of perfectionists have and overachievers is really trying to find out what's the right thing to do, getting stuck in what you call super yacht thinking, and having this analysis paralysis. Okay, there's so many things we want to do, and maybe we want to do what you say, we want to get into the muck of things and really
Mm-hmm.
embrace it, but we get stuck because
Mm-hmm.
there's so much choice. And you also mention in Meditation for Mortals the power of choosing over trying to decide.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, when you're in that phase, when you have analysis paralysis, when your head is overflowed with so many ideas and possibilities, how do you choose what to do, knowing that there isn't a right thing to do? There isn't the one thing to do, but you just want to choose and do something, but you're feeling stuck and paralyzed.
I mean, with difficulty is the answer. And I certainly am not claiming perfection in any of these things. And that would be, I guess, sort of internally contradictory as well, wouldn't it, to claim to be a perfect imperfectionist. Um, but on my good days, what I am able to do is to remind myself of the yeah, again, it's a sort of an awareness of the field that I'm in, right? It's understanding that we are all of us all the time in a situation where there are a million very meaningful things we could do with the next hour of our time or the next week or a whole lifetime. And we don't have to try to persuade ourselves that all the ones we're not going to do aren't really very important. That's the bit I think where we're kind of getting caught up a lot of the time in analysis paralysis. What's the best choice? Well, in some sense, there are probably 1,000 best choices, and the situation is so hopeless in a way. The chances of not neglecting something that matters are so small that there's something very liberating about that, right? Suddenly you realize that if you really take on board how finite you are in this ocean of infinite possibilities, you just sort of might as well do one of the things, because the thing that we're often struggling with in those indecision situations, which is we want to avoid loss. We want to not have to sacrifice something for something else. When you see that that's just not on the cards, and that all you're doing is choosing which sacrifice to make, it's actually a sort of an easier choice to make. I think it's always difficult and painful, but it's one of those many things in life where acknowledging that it's inevitably difficult makes it much less difficult, and certainly much less sort of torturing, because sure, the nature of the person I am is someone who's got to pick one from 1,000 things in the next hour or the next whatever, all of which would be great if I could do any of them. But so I'll follow my intuition. I'll follow hints from the environment about which one to choose, but I won't be expecting that by choosing one, I'm deeming it to have been the exact right thing to spend that time on.
It's interesting you talking about intuition, because that's really what I've come to the conclusion works best for me. A combination of knowing what the deadlines are, what are the priorities, what's happening in life and business, and then just tapping into intuition. And I really love Taoism and the Tao Te Ching, which I know you also speak about. And that has been the easiest for me, because instead of trying to make all the decisions with my prefrontal cortex and rational and doing analysis of pros and cons of every decision, I just sort of tap in and think, okay, this feels the most aligned. Maybe there's something else that could be done, should be done, is better, but this is what feels most aligned. And also, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, Oliver, what feels most aligned isn't what necessarily feels easiest, nor is it necessarily what feels hardest, because we can actually make the hard feel easy, which you also talk about, but it's what just feels most aligned. I'm curious, what has been your experience with listening to your intuition, following what life asks of you, and tapping into that?
I completely agree with you. I mean, it's been a difficult journey because I'm very much a sort of a left brain person in my background. I want to figure it all out and exert a kind of top-down intellectual control. But I took, for many years, it took me a while to realize, but I was sort of, you receive signals from the world that that's not the way to do it. And one of them, I find, might not be true for everyone, but certainly true for me, is that if you do try to fully frontal cortex your way through planning and scheduling your work, often you'll fail because life will get in the way. But even when you succeed, there is a kind of a lifelessness to that, right? So I write about having this experience many times of kind of excitedly embracing some new goal setting technique and then coming up with exactly the milestones I was going to meet every day for the next month or whatever. And it's all super exciting on Monday morning when you're doing it. And then Tuesday morning, when you start to go through the process of just carrying out these orders that you've given to yourself, something is really wrong. Like something's not fun anymore. And you have to be careful. Obviously, plenty of bits of any work are not going to be ecstatic, but there's something that we can expect to be present in meaningful work, which is that sense of being engrossed by the broader project that we're on. And that would go away when I was trying to sort of rely completely on intellect. And I came to see eventually that not only did I get sort of a better steer on things by allowing some role for intuition, but also it just makes more sense from a very kind of instrumental point of view. If I really want to do uh, option A instead of option B, which was the one I had scheduled for this particular time in the day, then like why not harness that energy? Why spend the whole hour or 2 hours like squashing the energy that is there for option A because I've told myself I'm going to do option B. So look, it's not totally intuitive. I'm not recommending that anyone sort of have no other system. But as you say, I think from what, as I understand it, intuition sort of has the final call where possible, not when you've made a plan to meet with someone or something, of course, but like, so you can record all your tasks, you can select maybe the 20, I don't know, I'm picking numbers out of the air, but you could select maybe the 20 things that you're working on in this season of your life or this week or something. Fine, that kind of structuring is great. But when it comes to, okay, it's 10:15 on a Thursday, I've got an hour that I could use for anything. What's it going to be? I think eventually intuition does have to have a big say.
I totally resonate with what you're talking about when we're forcing ourselves to do that thing because that's what we decided. I mostly use time blocking, so I do that a lot where I schedule in my deep work every morning. But what I've realized is what works even better for me is a combination of a bit of that, then listening to my intuition, and then retrospectively writing what I did. So then I can sort of see what I spent my days and weeks on.
I like that. Yeah, and you can obviously, you can invent all sorts of tweaks to these things. You can have a time box that you've decided you're going to dedicate to creative focus, but you can have 3 or 4 different projects that would fit the bill and go for the one that you feel like. And I love that idea of like using it partly as a record and partly as a schedule, because then you can reassure yourself at the end of the day that at the end of the week that you did it, but you didn't. You weren't sort of forcing yourself into a straitjacket. Yeah.
It's also what you're saying about harnessing that energy. If you feel a particular creative calling to suddenly work on the book, even though you'd scheduled to do this other proposal for a client, why not switch it around? Why not work on the book when you feel that huge leap of inspiration and then do the proposal? But of course, I think to get to that stage, or definitely that was the case for me. I don't know if that was your case too, Oliver, but for me, that took a lot of self-trust and a lot of experimenting to realize, oh, I can trust myself that I won't just do that work when I feel like it. And that if that proposal needs to be sent this week, it will be sent this week, even if I don't do it the very minute I'd scheduled to do it.
Yeah, I think self-trust is what it's all about. I'm very glad you brought that point up. I mean, I write in the new book about a friend of mine, the meditation teacher, Susan Piver, and her experience with this and how scary it can be, she puts it, to sort of allow yourself to do what you feel like doing. And of course, every different professional context will have certain degrees of autonomy. So, we're talking about whatever discretion you do have. There's a terrible fear that you're just going to use it to do the easy stuff, that you're never going to use it to keep your commitments, that you're never going to, or even, if your life is, if you're enough of a sort of autonomous person, maybe you're just going to like sit on the sofa all day and eat potato chips and not do any work at all. And she writes about how she found that like that's just not how it goes, right? If that is based on this notion that deep down you're a terrible person, and the chances are pretty high that you're not. And Susan writes about discovering that, of course, you end up paying your bills, you end up doing the admin, you end up kind of wanting to do it at particular times and in particular states of mind, because guess what? You're the kind of person who likes to keep your commitments and follow through on things and, not get hounded by debt collection agencies and all, right? You can trust yourself. At least, you should at least give it a shot to see if you can trust yourself, put it that way.
Yes, that's in the part on self-compassion, which was so nice to read about in a book that focuses in the productivity space, because it's not addressed enough, and so many high achievers, overachievers, perfectionists all of them, I would suspect, have a very strong inner critic. And
Hmm.
what I realized when I was preparing for a speech on failure was that this is also something that's in our brain when we are constantly criticizing ourselves and we see everything we do as a failure.
Hmm.
Then the habenula part of the brain stops us from receiving dopamine. So
Hmm.
everything we do just feels worse and
Yeah.
worse and worse. And that because the inner critic is judging everything as insufficient and not good enough. And this can, yes, be very demoralizing, even if we do reach our goals. So that's why I feel that self-compassion is sort of a missing piece here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'm totally in the camp of strong and vocal inner critic. Um, what I was really getting at in that part on self-compassion as well, I wanted to make sure I addressed was the kind of cringe reaction that a lot of us have towards that stuff. So it's almost like the inner critic does its clever work of shutting down the idea of self-compassion, and I write in the book about how what a breakthrough it was for me to come across this notion of the reverse golden rule from the philosopher Ido Landau, where he talks about just sort of resolving not to treat yourself worse than you would treat a friend or a person working behind the checkout at a supermarket or something. And it's so striking to realize how much worse we do tend to treat ourselves than we would ever dream of treating other people. And what I liked about that was it doesn't have that feel of like you've got to really think of yourself as super special and shower yourself with compassion and all this stuff that sort of causes my defenses to rise. It's just equality, It's just like maybe start by not treating oneself significantly worse than you would treat other people. Maybe if you're beating yourself up for missing a deadline, think about how you would actually counsel somebody who wasn't you, who was in that situation. It's usually pretty unlikely that would be sort of screaming and berating them. At the same time, there's room there for tough love, right? Sometimes we need to be firm with our friends, and sometimes we need to be firm with ourselves. But that's a very different thing than screaming at yourself for being a total jerk.
And I often feel that when we're able to have that self compassion, we actually want what's best for us.
Mm.
And therefore, if exercising means that we'll be in better shape, we'll want it not from a place of should or have to, or you lose if you don't, but just because we want to be in good health. And same goes for all the business decisions. So I actually feel that when we're able to be more compassionate, it stops being a should and have to, but a sort of, oh, I get to do this and this is actually good for me. And, let's make things happen that are good in our life and not everything a struggle.
Totally, yes. And it still strikes me as kind of amazing, which tells you something about the mindset that I came all into this all with. But it's like, could it possibly be, that that life isn't a cruel trick where you have to the only way to make it work is to spend most of your time doing things you don't want to do, or where you have to sort of shout at yourself to do things. Could it possibly be that the things you want to do and the things that society needs you to do and the things that you ought to do are kind of all largely the same things? And I think this is where issues of privilege come in, and absolutely this is a different situation for different people. There are people whose situation obliges them to do a lot of very miserable stuff that is not meaningful in and of itself. I think that's all true. But let's at least move forward in our lives with keeping open the possibility that there isn't like some horrible trade-off we've got to make between meaningful work and remunerative work, or between fulfilling our obligations and embodying our passions and things like that.
Yes, if we allow it to be
It could
easy.
just be that, this isn't all just a mean trick played by an evil god. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, yes. And this makes me think of the notion of resonance. So you mentioned in both 4,000 Weeks and Meditation for Mortals, and this idea that if we're so into the control and we want everything to be so control, then life loses its touch and its ability to move us.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I resonated with so deeply when I read this, because I tried for so long to be very productive, high performing, have everything under control. And then it loses its spontaneity, flexibility, magic, synchronicities. And so I'm wondering, how do you have that balance then of pursuing your goals, taking those actions, but also leaving that space for flexibility and resonance and spontaneity?
Yeah, I mean, the how is the whole question. And always for me, the sort of perspective shift has been central to whatever follows downstream of that in terms of behavior changes and habits and techniques. So in this case, the recognition that if I actually achieved the control I thought I wanted and was sort of neurotically trying to get over my life and work, that actually I wouldn't have wanted it. This is related to the thing we were just speaking about, right? About scheduling your goal setting down to the minute over a 6-month period, and then finding that it's got no life in it. That's an example of the resonance draining away. Many other examples, the ways that unplanned things happening, people's tearing us away for one reason or another from our schedule for the day, turn out to lead to really wonderful things. So it really comes down to an attitude. I think then you can certainly see that attitude embodied in certain techniques and not in others, right? So ideas like coming up with the 3 must-dos you want to try to get done over the course of the day, which is a time-honored productivity technique, that seems to me to be very consistent with this not obsessively controlling life. You're saying, look, all sorts of things are going to happen today, and I'm going to seek to make sure that 3 of them are these. And then there's a kind of incredibly rigid approach to scheduling and certain versions of time boxing and certain versions of things that get called monk mode and all the rest of it in online spaces, which maybe are not so consistent with that notion, because they are sort of aiming at comprehensivity. They're aiming at scheduling every moment of the day, getting all the things done in life that you need to do, being sort of explicit about them, having them all on lists, when of course nobody's life is like that, because where would you stop, right? Are you going to put brushing your teeth on a list? No, you're just going to do it. Are you going to try to engage with your kids over dinner by following some minute by minute playbook? No, of course not. That would eradicate the value of that interaction. So yeah, it's a balance. The unsexy answer always to these things, right?
Yeah, it really is. And I think I reflected a lot on it from reading your book also, because I'd realized I'd gone too far down the time blocking, Pomodoro, control every micro minute. But equally, we don't want to go too far the other side, because also I think sometimes with too much flexibility, it can take us longer to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So if we think, okay, every morning for 2 hours I'll do deep work, and these are 5 core areas in which I can do deep work, then we have one decision to make amongst these 5, versus being like, I can start the day any way I want and
Right.
do
No,
this.
absolutely. Yeah. And so there's the decision fatigue side of it, and there's just like, right, it's like toddlers, right? We want limits. We need to know that we couldn't just do anything at all. It's very sort of crazy making to feel that you could do anything at all. So rules for yourself can take account of that and can sort of limit the space within which you are. You can limit the space. I mean, the toddler analogy is a good one, right? Because I remember when our son was 0 and 1, we have these things which in the US where we lived then are called pack and plays. I don't know if it's the same thing, but different kinds of sort of gated little play areas that you put up so that your kid who would choke on anything if you were to pick them up can run wild, but within a constrained area. And that's kind of an important analogy in a way, right? I want to feel like I'm playing on some level in my work, but it's probably wise to be playing within a certain area to keep things moving forward and to keep my commitments and to keep money coming in and all the rest of it. So yeah, I think that's these both have a crucial role.
Yes, that's definitely the sort of balance that works best for me, having that both in my personal life and business. Like you said, the three outcomes for the day or the main core task, and then having some flexibility how you move them around. And sometimes I do follow exactly my time blocking the
Yeah.
whole day, but I don't have to. I think
Right.
it's
Right.
the pressure.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that reminds me of like something I've said a few times here and there is like all these techniques can be great tools when you are no longer seeing them as like paths to your salvation, right? When you're no longer using the Pomodoro technique because you think that if you do it enough, you can do all the things and you can optimize your time to the point where you're completely on top of everything and finally get to feel okay about yourself and stop beating yourself up. Like in that context, the Pomodoro technique is a disaster. But if you can let go of that to some extent and just be, have more of the attitude that we're talking about in this conversation, absolutely no harm using the Pomodoro technique to organize your day. That's great. No problem at all. It's sort of drained of this kind of terrible high stakes, psychological, almost religious kind of struggle that it's involved in. And then it's just like, yeah, it's a useful tool. Great. Yeah, like somebody doing woodwork, a woodworker would, use the relevant tool for the moment and wouldn't be like, I'm going to do everything with this one tool now forever and it's going to make me a better person.
Yes, I think it probably all stems from this core belief that we're not enough, and we try and seek in the productivity world all these different tools to prove that we are enough. And if we do everything perfectly and if we achieve everything, then we'll be enough. But if we give that up and just say, hey, it's a useful tool, I can use it from time to time, it's quite useful, then it loses that.
Right.
Yeah.
And to some extent, you have to some extent go through a process, and I'm still on it. We all are, maybe in some ways, of kind of understanding that in some sense you already are enough, and then the tools are tools again, and that's really exciting. And so people occasionally ask me, like having read the books, are there any productivity techniques you still use despite having rejected productivity culture in this way? And I'm like, oh, totally. I mean, I'm still completely excited if someone tells me about some new system or app or book or, and partly that's because I haven't gotten over certain things in my psyche, but partly that's because I have. And now it's just like, great. It's a slightly eccentric hobby I have. No big deal, right? And maybe I'll keep evolving the techniques that I'm using for the rest of my working life. Okay. Yeah, that can be fun. People find all sorts of different things fun. And if for those of us whom the answer is reorganizing our to-do list in different ways, fair enough. Each to their own.
One of the core themes in both of your book is really around this notion of control and also I feel anxiety behind it. So I'm thinking, okay, these tools are great when they use as tools, but when it comes to really our relationship with control, our need for control in a way to soothe our anxiety, in a way to ignore the limitations and constraints of our life, how can we sort of let go a bit of this control? We've spoken a bit here about flexibility and resonance, but I still definitely feel it a lot in myself, and probably a lot of people resonate with this. Really, the feeling that if we can control everything, it'll be okay. But that's an illusion, and then it prevents us from living fully. And I know your next book is going to be around being more alive. So how can we just loosen a bit the grip of control so we can feel that aliveness?
It's a very good question. And again, I mean, with these questions that begin with the word how, my answer is very much like by feeling our way gradually into a different approach to life. And also, this or that technique or tip or daily habit or something. So that the move for me that has been so powerful is the one that the first chapter of Meditations for Mortals is called "It's Worse Than You Think," on the liberation of defeat, and that's really sums up what I'm about to try to say. The really helpful thing for me was to see just how futile the struggle for that kind of control was. So, one sort of philosophical therapeutic approach might be to say, well, look, you can't have all the control you anxiously crave, but you can have quite a bit of it. So here are some of the ways to do that. And my preferred technique has always been much more like, let's just really look at how hopeless this quest is, and then it becomes rather easy to give it up a little bit. So one of the examples I use there, right, just in the simple case of overwhelm, if you feel that getting through your whole to-do list and doing all the things that feel important is really difficult, then you're going to spend your whole life struggling to do that, trying to find new systems for doing it, berating yourself for not putting enough self-discipline into doing it. But if you can see that actually for certain reasons it's not really difficult, it's impossible, the supply of things that feel like they need doing is to all intents and purposes infinite, then you can suddenly kind of taste a little bit of relaxation in the midst of overwhelm, because you can say, well, oh, this thing that I thought was just really hard and I just needed to, buckle down and finally find a way to do, it just isn't something that humans get to do. And then you can say, like, okay, well, what shall I do? Where shall I put my effort and energy? And I've just repeated endlessly in every interview and all over the place this line from G.U. Kennett, the Zen master, who said that her preferred way of teaching students was not to lighten the burden of the student, but to make it so heavy that he or she would put it down. And I think that really gets at something so powerful for me, that sense that the way to learn to try to control life less is to see that you are already failing to control it on account of being a finite human. It's not that you are controlling it, so now control it less. It's like, see what the situation already is. The situation already is that there's an infinite amount of stuff to do, and that you'll never fully understand any other human being, and that you'll never be able to predict the future with any degree of high confidence. And then it becomes possible to just like swim in this situation and do cool stuff, and et cetera, because you're no longer trying to aim for this futile struggle to kind of get outside of life somehow.
Perhaps when you're swimming and stuff, as you say, that's sort of when you enter deep time. And I really like this notion that you spoke about, this idea of deep time. So escaping the rat race of being so busy all the time to being really fully immersed and slowing down and being fully, again, in the now. But I know you also spoke about if we force ourselves too much to be in the now, it becomes counterproductive. And so I'm more thinking like, yes, this idea of deep time. I'm thinking if someone is listening here and they're super busy, they're always rushing, they're probably listening to this podcast as they're going somewhere or cooking, and they're thinking, I want to be more swimming and in flow and calmer and be more in this deep time, but I can't seem to get off that addiction to speed, which you also discussed. So how can we slow down and get more into this deep time?
Again, I think it is a matter of, it's not about sort of forcing yourself to have a different personality. It's about taking a slightly closer look at how things already are. So one of those we've spoken about is really sort of allowing yourself to see that you're not going to get to the end of the list. And no one ever does, and that's fine. Another is to see that we don't really sort of have time in the way that we think we do. You can't put it aside for later. You can never really be sure of how many interruptions are going to get in the way of your plans. You can sort of pay attention to the fact that actually you just get a moment and then a moment and then a moment. And that really you're only responsible for acting wisely or responsibly in the next moment, right? It's that you can't be in any of the other ones. So the point about being present in the moment, again, yes, it's not about trying to be present in the moment, which leads to all sorts of trouble, but just seeing that you already are inevitably only present in the moment, that all your worries about the future or regrets about the past are phenomena of the present moment too. And if you want to go really sort of deep into it, I mean, I write in 4,000 Weeks about how I think it's reasonable to think that before industrialization, before the advent of public clocks and the objectification of time in that way, the very idea of you and time being these two separate things that you're in a relationship with, you're trying to dominate time, or you feel that time is nipping at your heels, or you think you're guilty of wasting time, or you're trying to maximize the value of your time. Like this is something we add to the real lived experience of just being in our lives. And one of the pointers to this that helps some people is this idea that maybe instead of having time, it makes sense to think of that we are time, that we are these stretches of duration of experience on the planet from our birth to our death. And sometimes it's useful to put a schedule on top of that, or to try to do twice as many actions in an hour as you previously were doing, and that can all be useful, but it's all just an overlay to this kind of immediate experience, which is all that we actually have. This isn't about like turn yourself into a enlightened master. This is actually what your experience really is. And when you feel that you're rushing fast to keep up or something like that, that's true physiologically in your body and your mind. You are rushing, but like the thing you're keeping up with is also something that you are bringing into the situation as well. It's not like you're not actually on a little track with boxes in it that you've got to try to keep up with each box or anything like that. You're just here, and then these are all things that can be useful or harmful and maddening depending on how we internalize them. Does that make any sense at all? I don't know.
I think this idea that instead of wanting to capture time and hoard it, it's really just seeing that, oh, we are just each moment at a time. And when we shift that perspective, then we can sort of relax, because instead of always rushing to get to the next thing, we realize, okay, well, I only have this moment. Let me just do what I'm doing fully, and then there'll be the next moment.
Yeah. And honestly, I think you could almost make the claim that there's nothing in any of my writing anywhere that is about like that is sort of ultimately about like, why don't you do things differently? It's more like, why don't we look a bit more honestly at how things actually are? And then the doing things differently sort of follows, right? I mean, if you can really feel your way into that notion that we just get one moment after the next, then a lot of anxiety about the far future does sort of fall away. It's not because of some technique for getting rid of it.
That's why I found your book so powerful, because the shifts in perspective lead to different actions. And instead of someone telling you like, you don't need to follow your time blocking so rigidly, you naturally sort of feel into it, and you build that self-trust and maybe add a bit more flexibility, or you find you're a little more present on a day-to-day basis because you have embraced these notions from a perspective and an inner shift.
And that's the only kind of real change that's ever worked for me. I think techniques can get you there. You can sort of use them as handrails to get through to a new perspective and say, well, I'm going to sort of act as if, fake it till I make it a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. But the thing that makes the difference is seeing that things aren't as you thought they were, or understanding them in a fresh way. And then, yes, it seems obvious that certain habits and methods and techniques will be more appropriate than others once you're in that new situation.
I'd love to hear a quick peek about your next book, or at least what you're reflecting on and thinking about now after both 4,000 Weeks of Meditation for Mortals. Sort of what is top of mind for you, and what are you sort of diving deep into?
Yeah, I mean, this is not a book idea that I'm going to. This is a set of themes that seem um, at the center of what I'm writing, and I'm a little bit further down the line of it being a book than I'm. I'll probably give the impression here, but that's because it's all. Anyway, never mind. I'll try and say the thing that is interesting to say rather than get you get embroiled in the details of the book process. Um, One of them, and this is a sort of carrying over from Meditations for Mortals, is this idea of action and what it is to take action, and the sense that action is the means through which we live meaningful lives or not, right? There's that famous line about action being the antidote to despair when it comes to, politics and environmental crisis and all the rest of it, that there's something important about action in that sense. There's a lot of chatter online these days about the idea of agency, the idea that actually we often sort of get wrong the question of how much we could do and what we could do if we just sort of freed ourselves up to do it. So I'm really interested in sort of re-understanding action, and I've always been quite hostile to a certain view of personal development that puts some kind of passivity as the pinnacle, that sort of suggests that if you could only get rid of all your ego and ambition, you'd be happy because you just sort of do nothing and you wouldn't want to do anything. And I'm always trying to rescue some notion of ambition, some way of saying, like, I'm done going through life achieving things because I feel insecure and unworthy. But I'd quite like there to be a way of achieving things in life because it's a fun thing to do, right? And I actually just want to do things and create things, and not feel that that sort of floaty, egoless desirelessness is the only path to sanity. And then the other big theme that's really been relevant for me recently is what I label, perhaps wrongly, aliveness. The sense that, and this connects to the resonance that we were talking about, right? This idea that there's something that maybe the thing that we're looking for, as Joseph Campbell famously said, is not the meaning of life, but a real experience of being alive, and that a lot of what we value in life can be identified with this word aliveness. A lot of what is wrong with our lives can be seen as the absence of that. I think this comes massively into the AI conversation, the role of human aliveness. I think it's there also in like the sort of online versus offline digital detox stuff, which seems to be going to some new interesting places. So all this stuff is like whirling around my head, and my job is to try to not just spend the next months having it whirl around my head, but give it some sort of shape.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. This has been such an amazing privilege to be here with you, to hear all your thoughts and insights on this. What's one question you would have liked me to ask maybe, or something that you feel would be helpful to make this interview complete?
Well, do you think we should talk just very quickly about the sort of given the title and some of your interests, are sort of the role of focus and distraction and interruption? I mean, I think we've had a great conversation. We don't need to go there, but that's just one that springs to mind if you're interested. We were talking just before we started recording about, there's a chapter in my new book that makes the argument that we can go too far in trying to block out interruptions and trying to structure our time so that serendipitous occurrences become a problem. I don't want to use a system for organizing my time that automatically defines it as bad if my son or my partner or a friend or someone I'm working with wants to sort of interrupt me. Maybe I need to tell them to go away for a while, maybe, but I don't want to start from the assumption that that's a bad thing because the next 3 hours are my time for deep focus or something like that. So that's my sort of slightly counterintuitive, challenging thought about the automatic virtue of focus, I suppose. I don't know. Feel free to elaborate or push back.
Yes, I think it again comes back to that balance, because I struggled a lot to first become very focused and get into deep work. I don't know if I struggled, but let's say I built that muscle of
Right.
focus
Took effort.
more
Yeah.
and got better at it. But then also reading your book and reflecting on what makes life feel alive, I realized that being too rigid again means that maybe you're very focused and you get a lot done, but you miss out on serendipity, flexibility, opportunities, some nice things in life that can happen. So it is really nice to see both sides. Maybe for the people listening to reflect on, okay, do they need to strengthen a bit the focus muscle and they're chronically distracted all the time, or are they on the overly rigid, highly
Yeah.
focused route and need to maybe loosen up a bit and allow a bit of serendipity in their lives?
I think it's very interesting. And I think there is a selection bias situation as well, right? Which is a little bit ironic, which is that the more interested you are in this stuff, the more you think it's incredibly important to build lots of focus into your life. It's at least possible that that means that the more you could do with the inverse, right? People sometimes say like, well, but if I went down that road, what if I just like didn't do anything and I never wanted to complete any of my projects? And a big part of the answer to that is like, yes, maybe there are some people like that, but you wouldn't be asking that question if you were one of them, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Oliver. I've got both books here for people who are listening or watching. Highly recommend. I read them both twice, a ton of value. Second time round, just as much, if not more value. And thank you so much, Oliver. This has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for being here today.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.